good morning in Colombia, good afternoon in UK and Europe. My name is Jose Puyana. I'm the head of ProColombia in the UK. Welcome to the second day of the Colombia Investment Roadshow, our flagship initiative in Europe for promoting FDI opportunities in Colombia, and which is today hosting participants from all around the world. In addition to these series of webinars, we are facilitating one-to-one conversations where over 70 project developers in Colombia have been able to pitch their initiatives to investors from different parts of the world. Once again, this event is only possible thanks to the support and commitment of each of the partners behind the initiative. The UK's Department for International Trade, the British Colombian Chamber of Commerce, the Colombian Embassy to the UK, Control Risks, EY, and of course, ProColombia's network of offices in Europe. Yesterday, we had a very successful day with over 250 people joining our first webinar, where we discussed Colombia's road to economic recovery. Additionally, we witnessed close to 60 meetings between project developers and investors with, let me tell you, very encouraging results. Today, we're moving to our second day and our second live webinar, the role of infrastructure and energy in a post-COVID era in Colombia, where we will look into the opportunities in Colombia for international investors in these two critically important segments. Our speaker lineup for today couldn't be better. The UK's Minister for Investment, Lord Grimstone, Colombia's Minister for Transport, Ángela María Orozco, and our new Minister for Mines and Energy, Diego Mesa, and John Laing's Managing Director for Latin America, Alex Yu. Our moderator for today will be Carlos Sánchez, partner at Durán Osorio Abogados. A little of housekeeping now. The moderator will introduce the speakers and will give each of them 15 minutes to make their initial remarks. He will then moderate a conversation between the speakers, after which he will open it up for Q&A. So please use the chat box for this and do indicate who the question is for. The webinar should end at about 2:20 or 25 British time, 3:25 Central European time. For those of you who want to follow along later, recordings of the webinars will be available on the event website and on our YouTube channel. If you're an investor and still haven't requested a meeting with Colombian project developers, please do so using the chat box below or following the instructions provided in the website. The details of each of the projects is available on the event website. Without further ado, I thank you all for being here. We have an amazing turnout already, and thank you very much for joining us, and thank you to each and every one of the speakers for being here today. Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jose. And thank you very much to ProColombia, the British and Colombian Chamber of Commerce, and all the other partners for organizing this event this year in a virtual format according to the new normality. And thank you to all our speakers. As Jose mentioned, we have a fantastic group of speakers. Some of them I have had the opportunity to meet before, not some others. We have Lord Grimstone, Boscobel, Minister of Investment of the UK, whose office promotes and supports outward investment and also responsible for the official development assistance in the UK. And I would like to start with you, Lord Grimstone. I mean, these are strange times for investment. Uncertainty is everywhere, and that might prevent investors of embarking in new ventures. But at the same time, there are new projects that are required to kickstart the economies, not only in our countries, everywhere in the world. Can you please tell us a little bit about what the British government is doing to support investors willing to go overseas, willing to go to Colombia for new projects?
Yes, well, first of all, good morning, good afternoon, Madam Minister. A great pleasure to meet you and to thank the organisers for organising such a great event today. As you heard, I'm the Minister for Investment of the United Kingdom. I'm responsible for all inward investment into the United Kingdom. I'm responsible for helping investors here and, of course, helping British firms and firms based here invest overseas. And I'm delighted to be participating in this third edition of the Colombian Investment Roadshow, which I know is the flagship trade and investment event of the British and Colombian calendar. I'm also delighted that this roadshow, by chance, coincides with the beginning of the UK-Colombia trade dialogue, the first of its kind between both countries. One of my fellow ministers is conducting that dialogue, and I'm sure that will further crystallise our trade and investment relationship. And this dialogue will complement the existing trade and investment tools in place, including our free trade agreement and our double taxation convention. And it will allow you, investors and companies, to have much more opportunities to do bilateral business. Now, I'm an investor myself. I'm a businessman by background. And until recently, I was chairman of Barclays Bank and chairman of Standard Life Aberdeen. So I'm very familiar with the challenges that investors face. I'm proud to be joined by such esteemed colleagues, and particularly glad to share the floor with Minister Orozco, who I know has been key to the ongoing development of the infrastructure sector in Colombia. This is a sector that has attracted great interest in Colombia from British companies in recent years, and we are proud to have been part of the golden age of Colombian infrastructure that underpins economic growth and development for millions of Colombians seeking connectivity, routes to market, and new opportunities. And I would like to congratulate Minister Mesa, who was very recently appointed as the Minister of Mines, and with whom our team in Colombia has had the pleasure of working with for some time on working towards our energy transition and climate change goals. And also, of course, I would like to welcome John Lang's Alex Yu. I know Alex's firm very well. I know he's visited Colombia many times over the past few years, and he's very much aware of the Colombian business environment from the point of view of a UK company, and I'm sure he'll be sharing his expertise with us. We could speak at length about our country's terrible experience of the coronavirus, the worst thing that has happened to the world during my lifetime. But I prefer to focus on the recovery. And as we recover, every country faces a choice between laying the foundations for sound, sustainable and inclusive growth, or continuing a pathway of locking in polluting emissions. And I believe I know what choice our people want us to make. Countries like Colombia that rely heavily on commodities are keen to demonstrate, I know, that a clean recovery and support for sustainable industries is possible. We have an extraordinary opportunity in front of us. We need not resort to legacy industries like hydrocarbon exports and coal mining. Last year, just over 1 year ago, President Duque visited London and signed a partnership for sustainable growth with the United Kingdom. This was symbolic of our deep shared commitment to tackling climate challenges. We share a vision of clean growth, and in the UK, since 1990, we have cut emissions by 42% while growing our economy by 2/3. So it can be done, and more can be done. A clean and resilient recovery is not a threat to jobs. It will create employment in industries of the future while addressing the urgent and linked challenges of public health, climate change, and loss of biodiversity. When President Duque visited London a year ago, I was not yet in office, but I now am, and I am going to take a very vigorous approach to this relationship. And I'm absolutely committed to ensuring that the UK works with Colombia to deliver a clean recovery through collaboration between our governments, but also our businesses. The industry has shown an extraordinary record of clean economic growth. And I'm convinced that the Colombian and UK industries should work together to share that experience and to show the world how it can be done. And we have to work together to ensure our economic recoveries support our other shared objectives in terms of climate change and sustainable and green growth. Next year, in November 2021, COP26 will take place in Glasgow, and I hope to see many of you there. These climate differences have had their difficulties in the past, But mark my words, this one will be different. And we expect and hope Colombia to be a key player in COP26, in particular in the very important areas of nature-based solutions and energy transition. And as governments, COP26 will require challenging commitments from all governments. And of course, this is at a time when the economic climate may provide an excuse to some not to make their commitments and not to live up to them. But we know that Colombia is committed to continuing to bypass coal and continue to invest heavily in non-conventional renewable energy. You're so lucky in Colombia, having natural and abundant renewable resources. But I know from UK investors who I've spoken to, these resources are so abundant that Colombia stands to be a world leader in renewable energy for domestic use and potentially for exports as well. And the RELAC initiative, a commitment made at UNCAS 2019 by Latin American countries, is to reach 70% renewable energy by 2030. Now look, quite simply, United Kingdom wants to be part of Colombia's green future. The International Climate Finance Initiative supports Colombia's green, fair and resilient recovery. Building on the £236 million spent in Colombia since 2011, with an upcoming £7 million call for proposals through the flagship UK fund, this will fund innovative capacity building projects that respond to Colombian demand in a range of sectors, from green finance to renewable energy and sustainable mobility, all contributing to an ambitious climate target. But look, I'm an investment minister, and I believe that the lasting ties between our countries will be deep industrial and economic ties based on investment. Our Department of International Trade in Colombia, we've identified a range of projects and opportunities in Colombia that are ideally suited to the UK's capabilities, to UK investors' interests in terms of sustainable energy, infrastructure, financial services, and healthcare. To highlight just a few, we are currently looking into increasing British investment and supply chain in projects such as the rehabilitation of the railway between La Dorada and Chiriguana for both freight services, the Bogota-Cundinamarca light rail system, and the Cali light road project. We want to help and we want to invest in all these projects. And the world leader the UK has long been a world leader in railway systems and wants to be a major player in these Colombian projects. And we also know there is good interest in the Bogota water treatment plant and in sustaining mobility for public transportation in the main Colombian cities using British clean technology. And we champion my department, London, as a global centre for green finance. And we've been actively engaging with Bancodex and the Ministry of Finance on the issuing of a green bond in the London Stock Exchange sustainable bond market. And I would love to assist you as a banker. Any banker likes doing transactions. So I would love to assist you in doing that. And in renewable energies, we are working on exciting projects in green hydrogen, the circular economy, and recycling and waste management. And of course, we're also working with multilateral organizations. The Inter-American Development Bank are interested in attracting UK investment for the projects selected during the 2019 Colombia Renewable Energies Auction. So just to leave you with one message, we are committed to working together, both our government and our private sector, with you. I feel we haven't always given enough attention to each other in the past, and I want to remedy that, and I want us to work together on economic recovery by implementing a clean and resounding clear recovery strategy. I hope this is the first of many of my dialogues with you, and as I said before, I look forward next time to meeting you all in person. Thank you very much.
Winston, thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting indeed. Now I would like to move to Minister Osorio, our transportation minister. You're in charge of one of the departments of most relevance in this moment. As you know, in times of crisis, public spending in infrastructure is probably one of the most efficient tools to keep the economy going. But Lord Grimstone just mentioned this, and now the challenges are more than they used to be. It's not only about spending, it's also creating an investment program to grow in a sustainable manner, a green investment program. Can you please, Minister, let us know about this strategy for our country?
Invitation. It's an honor to be here, Lord Grimstone, Alex, Minister Mesa, which I don't know, he'll be joining us in a minute, Carlos, and also all the group of investors that are connected today to this webinar. As Lord Grimstone said, these are challenging moments for the world, for the countries, for all of us. We're crossing this impressive and amazing pandemic, which is also one of the most important challenge I've ever faced in my lifetime. And I have to be honest, this sector, the infrastructure sector, has been one of the first sectors that was reactivated after the lockdown, the strong lockdown. And I am proud to say that we have recovered most of the contracts that were in place by February. Where almost 820 contracts recovering more than 80,000 employments in 30 states or 30 regional departments of the country. So yes, Minister, this is one of the sectors that is one of the most important sectors, and our whole new programs also takes into account the challenge of sustainability. I believe these are moments in which we need to provide and guarantee that our current projects and our projects are sustainable, but also that their new projects meet the sustainable development goals that really encumbers our sector. I want to start. Can you please pass the next slide? Again, the next one. Okay, I just like to present like a brief presentation of our commitments in our different projects, both transportation and also infrastructure. So the first thing that it's important to highlight, please have the next slide, is that according to our data, to the 2014 data, the transportation sectors emitted 29 million tons of CO2, almost 12% of our country's greenhouse emissions. According to the projections, as we are today in them, the sector will emit more than 40 million tons of CO2 equivalent by 2030, which indicates the urgent need for strategies that allow us to make a transition towards more sustainable mobility. And this is something that it's multi-sectorial. We work with different ministers in our policy. Next slide, please. And we have been working throughout the whole government precisely along the lines of our National Development Plan 2018-2022 in order to improve and to design this transition to a more sustainable transportation system. One of our chapters from our PACT, our Transportation and Logistics Plans, provides for a sustainable urban regional mobility for equality, competitiveness, and well-being. And precisely, next please, this chapter of our National Development Plans had to do with our public transportation system. We are working towards this ambition of developing a sustainable transport framework. And along all those lines, we have not only enacted a national electric mobility strategy in 2019 with the Minister of Mines and Energy and the Minister of Environment. And along the lines of those, our Congress also enacted an electric mobility law, Law 2019, a law that was written by President Duque when he was a senator, when he was in chamber. And this law provides for incentives precisely for electric vehicles within our green growth policy that was enacted by our National Economic Council document 3934, in which we all the sectors contribute with not only developing in our sector precisely a sustainable mobility strategy along the lines of a national urban and regional mobility policy, and also along the lines with sustainable road infrastructure. Which are the actions in order to develop this big framework? We are really working towards a multimodal freight operation systems for cargo, taking into account that, as you mentioned, Lord Grimstone, our train investments for the cargo movements are fundamental for changing the type of energy that we're using for moving our cargo. So we have one of the most important projects is La Dorada Chiriguaná, of course, but also another one of our most important projects with regard to cargo, the public-private partnership for recovering our Magdalena River navigability. And taking that into account, that's also accompanied by a freight transport modernization program, which was enacted in 3 different laws with incentives, not only tax incentives, but also economic incentives, in order to change our old truck fleet and at least renew 24,000 trucks during this government. Then, when we look at the whole picture, what we are trying to deliver is that mainly the cargo through all the country will be complemented by these 3 different types of modes of transportation. What we want is to not only complement them, we don't want one to compete against the other, but mainly taking into account our geographical fragmentation to have really the most efficient way of transportation and sustainable way of transportation according to our regional and geographical regions and our geographical sectors. So those 3 projects are one of the most important projects that we have been delivered, and we think that we also are having incentives for renovating our public transportation fleet, and we'll talk right now about our program that was enacted since the year 2000, and we have as a goal to have by the year 2030 at least 600,000 electric vehicles within Colombia, taking into account public and private vehicles. Then with regard to public transport, as you all acquaint for, since the year 2000, we have been designing and implementing a national urban transport policy, moving from conventional bus service operations towards integrated public transport systems. We have, as a government, co-financed 70% of the design and implementation of 7 bus rapid transit systems in the metro areas in the principal capitals that move 5.4 million passengers per day on normal times, of course, not within the pandemic. And we are also developing 8 strategic transport systems in intermediate cities. We have invested more than $5 billion and we are also almost completed the systems. The BRT systems are already in place, but the strategic transport systems are still being constructed. We have also allocated and co-financed the first elevated line, the metro line, the first Bogota metro line. It was just allocated. It's an investment of $6.8 billion, and it's also accompanied by a $1.4 billion 2 bus rapid transit feeder trunk lines for the metro line. This also aligns with our national urban and transport policy for a sustainable mobility system. We also allocated our first regional tram train for the capital and for the regions and around Bogota, which must be in operation by 2024, and it's also an investment of $600 million. Taking this into account, we are moving towards a shared global vision by 2030, in which we're working within the transit-oriented principles to an urban mobility pyramid in which we are moving and investing and giving priority to a sustainable transport mode. We are promoting active mobility within the public transport, promoting, of course, the cycling, renovating, and I'll mention renovating the fleets, the vehicles fleets for the bus rapid transit systems and the strategic transport systems, but also promoting the renovation of the heavy truck fleet of Colombia, as well as the private vehicles through the electric mobility law. With regard to electric vehicles in progress, we have today in Cali already 26 electric buses in operation by September 2019, and we'll expect to have by the end of this year 100 more buses in operation. In Medellin, the BRT system, Metro Plus, have already 64 electric buses in operation. In Bogota, our integrated public transport system, Transmilenio, will have approximately 380 electric vehicles by December 2020. And all these bus rapid transit systems and strategic public transport systems are studying and implementing electric vehicle introduction phases. By 2022, to have at least 1,000 electric buses in our public transport systems in the different cities. We are also developing an electric bus national program with a feasibility study, and we're developing a pilot test evaluating the CAPEX incremental cost of an electric bus and the financial instruments to tackle it, because we need to promote a more active transition. We expect by 2030 to have at least 8,000 electric buses. Of course, all promoted by our electric mobility law and also by our financing law and our national development plan. We will expect by 2030 to have 30 cities with an electric bus component in our public transport system. We also, as mentioned, enacted the National Electric Mobility Strategy by August 2019. And this is all being developed, this feasibility study and pilot test, with the support project of the NAMA Move, including electrification actions for other transportation agreements and segments. This is what we have done until now. And at this moment, we are developing and just evaluating the public transport for other intermediate cities. At least we have 5 or 6 new projects coming into the pipeline, and these are the second phase of the strategic transport systems, in which we as a national government finance infrastructure and also the new buses for the public transport. And we are also taking into account the big cities, the metropolitan areas, the integrated public transport systems, financing the planned infrastructure for expansion and consolidation phases for approximately $800 million in cities such as Bogota, Barranquilla, Cali, Medellin, Pereira, Bucaramanga, and Cartagena. And as you mentioned, Minister, we not only allocated the regional train for Bogota, but with the participation of the British government, we are conducting at a regional level feasibility studies for different tram and regional train systems that are also gets into the pipeline of the electric mobility transportation systems, both the North Regional Tram for Bogota and also the Valle del Cauca commuter train, as well as the Barranquilla Metro Area Light Rail. Those are the next projects that are coming, in which we hope and expect to have British participation and investment. And we also are really grateful for the participation in the feasibility studies by the Fund of Prosperity, which has been fundamental for promoting these projects within Colombia. With regard to public roadworks, which are, of course, one of the main interests of Alex that is here with us today, we have to mention both our public works entity, which is Invias, which is the entity that develops the public works within Colombia, not the concessions. And we have to say that we have been incorporating sustainability criteria within our public works. We are developing sustainable projects, incorporating the criteria into the life cycle of the transport infrastructure projects. also considering to have these within sustainable communities, and we are integrating the needs, knowledge, and skills of the local communities in the entities projects, especially with our tertiary roads and our secondary roads, in which the participation and incorporating the needs of the communities are fundamental, and also empowering them to appropriate of these projects. We are also developing sustainable criteria within the institutionality of Invias, and introducing innovation systems, promoting the development of technology and innovation applied to transport infrastructure projects. We have signed more than 16 agreements with 16 national universities, precisely to incorporate new criteria and also incorporate the engineering, different entities and educational universities to bring all those new innovation criteria into the projects that Invias is developing today. We're developing technical guideline documents. We're also having research documents and information services implemented. And we have been also developing methodological documents and geographic information services, which all need to be incorporated into the planning phases of the new projects so that we have sustainable infrastructure within our public works. These are just few examples of projects that has been recently delivered incorporating sustainable criteria. One is the new bridge between Onda and Tolima, which is 3 kilometers north of the urban area of Puerto Bogotá and Onda. And when you look at the bridge, we have a solar-powered photovoltaic system panel that it's the one that lights the bridge, which is an environmentally friendly solution, but also reduces maintenance cost and improves required visibility and security conditions at night. We also have in La Circunvalar Volcán de Galeras in the south part of the country, which is in Nariño. This is a project that has been absolutely complemented and incorporated the sustainable criteria because it protected the water outcrops of the upper slope. It's an example in Colombia of how we protected the environment with developing the construction of this circunvalar. There is a construction of a section of special combined structure of cantilevered road and walls for the protection of the water resources. And this was all designed and constructed with the opinion and participation of the community that was really organized themselves in order to preserve the water outcrops of the region. We are also having now taking into account a second, the 5th-generation concession projects. That we have been, once we came into government, we started a program in order to really reactivate most of our 4th-generation concession programs that were allocated during the previous government but were stuck for many different reasons. And we had, from 29 projects that we had on phase, we had only 6 of the projects working. Today, we can say that we have 26 of the 29 projects working, reactivated, of course, with the participation of all the actors, not only the concessionaires and the financiers, but also the communities and the regional governments. That has been fundamental, working with the many ministries at a national level, but also working with the mayors and governors in order to really take into account the problems and tackle the problems that we found. And now we can say, proudly that we have reactivated most of the projects. We are working with all the actors, and we are also working at a community level in order to promote the appropriation of the projects by the communities, because in some of the areas that was part of the problem. Now, next, we are working on the 5th generation of concessions. And one of the most important criteria of this 5th generation of concessions is precisely to have the environmental and sustainable criteria included, not only taking into account sustainability at a geographic and environmental issue, but also to have much more support of the communities. So we need to take into account the communities who are working with the Inter-American Development Bank in order to have the sustainable certification of the bank incorporated in our 5th generation of concessions. This map is the first wave of concessions. These are the concessions and the projects that are almost there. Some of them are already structured and in a process of bidding. Some others are just finalizing the structuring process or are in the process of requiring the authorizations, both of the financing ministry and the national planning department. But this, in a nutshell, are the new projects. And you can see here, Minister Lord Grimstone, how multimodality is part of this new generation of concessions. We have 6 road projects, two at Bogota, which is at the south of Bogota, Lo Sur, but also at the north part of Bogota, Accesos Norte. We also have a project in El Valle del Cauca, which is Accesos Cali Palmira, that it's already, we have released we're in the pre-qualification phase and in the pre-bidding lines and conditions have been already released in order to receive comments of the different actors. We also have the Búgalo Guerrero Buenaventura project, which is a fundamental project for the competitiveness of the cargo that Colombia imports and exports. We also have the finishing part of what we previously called Ruta del Sol 2, which is mainly the Troncal de Magdalena Medio, which are 2 new concessions that will be allocated, which is Puerto Salgar, Barranca Bermeja, and Barranca Bermeja, San Roque. These are mainly, most of them are already there or already released or are in the process of receiving the qualifications by the Ministry of Finance and the National Development and National Planning Department. We also have 3 airport projects. One is a private initiative for the Aeropuerto de Suroccidente, which includes the Cali's airport, Cali Buenaventura Airport, and Neva's Airport. We also have the Cartagena Airport's private initiative and the new airport of Cartagena. Those are the airport projects that belongs to the five generation and the first wave of the 5 generation of concessions. And with regard to the other projects which are fundamental for multimodalism and improving our sustainability map is the Magdalena River public-private partnership, the Canal del Dique, which is mainly a very important environmental project. It includes transportation, but mainly is, I believe, the most important environmental project in Latin America because it really recovers not only all the area of the Magdalena River, but also prevents the floodings that we had in like 2010 and 11 that affected a population of 1.5 million people along the riverside. And we also have the La Dorada Chiriguaná train project. So all these projects have a total investment in capex of 18 billion. And we are, as I mentioned, including the sustainable criteria and working for the certification. We would like these projects to be certificated. And at the next one, which is our last slide, it shows what we consider will be the second wave of the 5th generation. I'll just finish here because I know I already took all the 15 minutes, but I believe this gives you a roadmap of what we're doing now and which are our main and most important criteria. This is something that we have believed not only because of the pandemic, but because of the problems we had in the implementation of the 4G generation concessions. We believe part of the problem was not including all these criteria, and we need all these criteria to be included, the sustainable certification, in order to have a more efficient new 5th generation concessions and to deliver them in a more efficient way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Osorio. Definitely, we are in front of a very interesting portfolio of projects and no doubt with a green stamp on it. Very interesting indeed. Now, I want to welcome Minister Mesa, the Minister of Energy and Mines. Welcome, Minister. As you know, energy plays a very relevant part in the strategy that Minister Osorio just described. We talked about electric vehicles and new ways of transportation, and of course, the energy, the power is the one thing that should underpin all this strategy. Now, please let us know about the projects that the government have in your area.
Yes. Hi, Carlos, and good morning to everyone. Apologize for entering the panel a little bit later than expected. I would like to greet my fellow panelists, our wonderful Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, Minister Lord Grimstone from the UK, Mr. Alex Yu, and you, Carlos. So I'm gonna start with a presentation. I'm gonna touch on the three sectors that I'm responsible for. That's energy, oil and gas, and mining. We have significant opportunities in all of these three projects. And I think we're focusing on, showing how this sector can be one of the jump starters of the economy after COVID-19. So you can turn the slide to the next one, please. And I'm gonna start showing you, what's the importance of this sector for the macroeconomic variables of the country. And we have a pretty steep curve based on the projections of economic growth in the next year. So our economy, as you can see, is expected to decrease by 5.5% this year, but the recovery for 2021 is expected to be significant. So we're expected to grow by a rate of 6.6% according to our numbers in the national government and the central bank. You could go to the next one, please. This next slide shows you the importance of the sector. So this is a sector that accounts for about 7% of GDP. When we look at foreign direct investment, is more than 1/3 of total FDI in Colombia. Export-wise is about 56%. And then we also have another angle, which is the investment in the region. So this is a sector that collects royalties. These royalties account for about 30% of the investment budget in the local and regional governments. We're focusing on what we call sustainable recovery going forward. That means that we have an agenda on the energy transition. We continue to work very heavily on incorporating renewables into our matrix. We're focusing on sustainable mobility that the minister already touched upon. And we have a strategy to diversify the mining portfolio. As you know, we depend heavily on coal, but we have huge opportunities in other metals, especially gold and copper, other sources of energy. And then we have a number of opportunities on the oil and gas sector. Next, please. We're also aware of what our investors are looking for. And we think we have a very good environment for investors. We are a country that is well known for its stability on the legal front. We've been working on trying to make the sector much more attractive. I'm going to touch on this in a minute. And we're also working on having a better social and environmental framework, which is key for this sector, especially for extractive industries. Next, please. So on the energy, I'm going to start with the energy very quickly. We have an agenda that focuses on three main pillars. We're looking at what we call efficiency and competitiveness. We're thinking about making the sector much more attractive and prone to competition with the introduction of new players. We're working also on expanding coverage. That's something that we ought to do because we still have a percentage of the population that doesn't have access to electricity or gas, and sustainability. So we obviously we're committed to the accords that we've signed internationally, and the energy sector obviously would be key to commit with those accords. Next, please. So on the tax front first, I'd like to remind of some of the steps that we've taken as a government over the last 2 years to make capital-intensive industries much more attractive to investment. So there are three main initiatives or policy actions that I would like to highlight. First one, in the tax act that we passed, the finance act that we passed last year, we reduced the corporate income tax rate, which by international standards, and especially now that we're part of the OECD, was relatively high. So we're going down from 33% to 30% over the course of 4 years. One measure that we took that I think it's great for this industry is that we decided that any VAT payments on capital goods will be creditable towards corporate income tax payments. Not deductible, but creditable. This means that the VAT paid on these assets will become an advance payment on the corporate income tax, and basically VAT disappears completely for fixed assets. And we also extended this measure for other two small taxes that were proven to be a bottleneck for investment. One is the financial transaction tax, and the other one was a small industry tax. So 50% of the payment is going to be creditable against corporate income tax, but after 2022, it's going to be 100% creditable towards corporate income tax. Next. And on the energy side, we also introduced a number of measures in the National Development Plan, also to make this sector much more attractive. So first, we decided to extend some of the tax incentives that were introduced in 2014. For example, we have a 50% uplift on investment on renewable energies and energy efficiency. We extended that for 15 years. That basically what it's doing is leveling the playing field for new investors that were not able to get this incentive against existing players. We also made VAT exclusion automatic for panels and other equipment for renewable generation. We introduced a mandatory requirement for distributors of energy to buy energy from non-conventional renewable sources in their portfolio between 8 and 10%. And finally, we set up an auction program, and we did 2 auctions in 2019. These auctions were very successful. I'm going to show you some of the results very quickly, but also it's going to show that there's an inertia in the renewable energy side. And what this allows was to finally exploit a huge potential that we had in wind and solar power. Next, please. And I'm just going to show you very quickly, what's the potential in wind and solar. This is the wind resource map in Colombia. It's focusing on the northern part of the country. And this is to show that the average wind speed, especially in La Guajira, which is a department that is in the northern tip of the country, is twice as high as the world average. So we have a huge potential for wind power in this part of the country. Next. The same applies to solar resource. In the northern part, solar radiation is about 60% higher than the world average. So the northern part of the country becomes this, huge energy potential. And obviously, what we found out is that the results of the auctions that we did in 2019 confirm this potential. Next, please. So after the auctions, which, as I said, were very successful, because when we started the government, we had a goal. When we started, we had less than 50 megawatts of installed capacity of non-conventional renewables. The president's goal was to go to 1,500. It was a significant jump. And after the auctions, plus some other projects for own generation, we are now 2,500 megawatts. So we basically multiply by 50 the number of projects of non-conventional renewable energy. Some of the other interesting results, because of the potential in Colombia, we were able to show that we're very competitive. The results in terms of price, both for solar and wind, show us that we ended up at the very bottom of the range compared to other auctions worldwide. So we ended up with an average price of $27.9 per megawatt, which sits, as you can see, in the lowest part of the range compared to all the auctions that were done in 2018 in the world. So this was very encouraging for us, and I'll show you in a minute. Next slide, please, where these projects are located. So it's no surprise when we look at where the projects are located. We have most of the projects concentrated in La Guajira. So we have 9 wind projects there. And then we have other 5 solar projects scattered across the country, but mostly in areas that are, where the radiation is biggest. These projects require investments that are close to $3 billion. This is all going to be built over the next 3 years. The La Guajira initiative is pretty important because we also need to develop infrastructure there, ports, roads, water, electricity coverage for the population. So this is going to transform the economic life of that department in the country. The result as well is we're going to go from less than 1% of non-conventional renewable energy in our generation matrix to 12%. So it's a significant jump. Next, please. There's much more to come. So I said, we're now with 2,500 megawatts, but what we have in the pipeline that already has connections that are approved by the planning unit is about 8,000 megawatts. Just to give you context, Colombia generation park is about 1,700. So this could, increase by 50% only with renewables. Obviously, we have other projects, hydro dam projects, thermal generation plants, etc. But there's, a huge potential to continue to invest and exploit the wind and the solar resources. We also have some biomass and waste to energy projects as well. Next, please. But next, these are just, some information that I'll give, I'll leave on the presentation, which I hope is going to be shared with all the attendees, but it's showing some of the other measures that we've taken to make the process to access to this tax incentive much more, agile. Next, please. And then on the energy, the other big investment opportunities that we're working on modernizing the sector. So we did a mission that looked at 5 different areas of our energy sector, and we have recommendations, and we're moving towards digitalization, decentralization, making demand much more active in the sector. Next, please. And this is going to require significant investment. For example, in smart metering, we're gonna have our first auction for batteries at a large scale. We already published for comments the terms of references. This, I think, is going to be the first one in Latin America. We're going to award storage system in the Atlantic department, which is in the Atlantic coast. And this is, going to help with smart grids and smart cities eventually. So this is part of this modernization initiative that we're doing. Next one, please. The last component, I'm going to touch on this because Minister Orozco touched on this, but as she said, we have this sustainable mobility initiative, which has a lot of electricity mobility, but also we have other initiatives such as biofuels. For example, we have programs in which, ethanol and biodiesel are going to be key for new programs with large transport companies. So this is also part of the green recovery initiative that we have. Next one, please. To close on energy, and I'm going to be very brief on oil and gas and mining. The last thing that I want to mention on energy is that we still have a business opportunity to help us close the gap in access to electricity. As I said before, we still have about 3% of the population that doesn't have access to electricity. We have some public funds. We're investing heavily. In these 2 years, we've been able to connect about 33,000 new families that didn't have electricity before. But we still have, close to 400,000, 500,000 families that need to have access to electricity. And there's a huge opportunity to get to these remote areas of the country with, for example, solar systems or mini grids. And this is something that obviously would have significant impact on terms of equity as well for these families. Next one. So moving to oil and gas, the next one, I'm going to be brief. When we came into this administration, we were faced with a challenge. Our reserves were coming down, but the main problem was that for the last 5 years, we didn't sign one single exploration and production contract. And obviously that would have a repercussion and seismic on exploration activity, etc. So we immediately started with 4 different initiatives. One was to continue to incentivize exploration of the continental basins, to start exploring offshore areas, especially in the Atlantic basin, look for the development of unconventional resources, and work on additional incentives for secondary recovery. Reserves continue to be low. even though we've been able to increase oil reserves from 5.7 years now to 6.3. That's a slight increase, but on gas we have an issue because reserves have come down from about 11 years now to 8 years. Next, please. Some of the results quickly. In the last 2 years, we went from 5 years of not signing one single contract. Now we've signed 31 contracts. 25 of them are onshore and 6 of them offshore. And we're gonna do another round in October. We have a permanent process for allocating areas. That means that we're continually open and receiving interest from companies that would like to nominate areas, and then we'll have a competitive process in October. Investment-wise, this area is probably going to have about $950 million in the onshore area. In the offshore is about $2 billion. And here in the offshore, we have a significant potential in some of the cities in the northern part of the country to become a hub for services and goods for the offshore industry. And I think the potential is not only for Colombia, but also regionally. As you know, Guyana, which is also in South America as a neighboring Venezuela, just found significant amounts of oil. But this is a very small country, very undeveloped, and they were struggling to find services for their new oil and gas industry, which is all offshore. So they were looking at Trinidad and Tobago. Obviously, Venezuela doesn't work for obvious reasons. So Colombia has that potential to also service other countries, especially Guyana in the region. Next one, please. On the unconventional side, we're moving ahead with pilots. We have significant potential both for oil and gas. On the gas side, what the preliminary studies have told us is that we could increase reserves from those 80 years to between 35 and 50 years. On the oil side, it could go up to 22 years. This would have significant impact on GDP growth. It could increase by 10%. FDI could increase by 40%, and there would be also significant job creation. But first, we need to do the pilots. The president asked us to do the pilots in order to make sure that we have the institutional capacity to monitor unconventional activity, which apparently is significant in Colombia. Next one, please. And then because between the offshore opportunities and the unconventionals will take some time to materialize, in the near term, we need to make sure that we can guarantee access to gas. So we're putting a tender for a second regasification plant. We have a small one in the Atlantic coast. The second one, which is this one, will be in the Pacific coast. And this will go along also with a gas pipeline. The capacity would be about 400 million cubic feet per day with storage capacity. This project probably combined with the pipeline, we're talking about between $500 and $700 million in investment. We're now receiving comments from potential investors, and we hope to issue the final tender in about a month or so, and hopefully we would award the gas terminal in the first quarter of next year. Next one, please. And now to close, moving to mining. Next one. On the mining side, the biggest opportunity, as I said at the introduction, is to diversify away from coal. And then we also have a significant amount of work to do on the legality front. We need to make sure that the illegal extraction is criminalized, and we need to fight that heavily. But thinking about investment, if you go to the next one, please, and the next one, thank you. We have significant projects in gold and copper that are in the pipeline to start this diversification away from coal. And we have significant resources in gold. The first project that is going to enter into operation this year is a gold mine that is going to increase Colombia's gold production by about 22%. It's large scale. It has state-of-the-art technology. It obviously complies with all the environmental standards, and hopefully this will be the first step towards diversification. Then we have another gold project also in Antioquia for next year to start construction. And then we have Soto Norte in Santander, which is a significant gold operation. And finally, Quebradona, which is a copper mine in Antioquia as well. Combined, we're looking at about $4 to $5 billion in investment in these projects. And we hope to continue to develop additional resources in the mining sector, which are also key for our energy transition strategy. The next one, please. And to close, this is just, showing what we're doing on the formalization. We have a goal to bring into legality about 27,000 miners that are subsistent or artisanal miners, and we're also providing them with access to the financial system, making sure that they have technical assistance, and we hope to try to get rid of all this not a formal mining activity that's widespread in some of the departments in Colombia. So with that, I close. I think the next one is just the closing slide, and I thank you all very much, and I hope I stick to time. Thank you.
Minister Mesa, thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting indeed. Before moving to our next speaker, let me first thank you, Lord Grimstone, for your participation in this panel. I understand that you have to leave the meeting soon. So before you're leaving, thank you for joining us. It was very interesting. It was a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Second, for all the people who's watching this webinar, in the handouts section of the application, you're going to find the presentations of both Minister Mesa and Minister Orozco. So you can download them. You also have a presentation of this webinar with the biographies of all the speakers. Of course, we are ready to receive your questions. You can do that in the chat box, also in the application. Now, let me introduce Mr. Alex Yu, who is the head for Latin America of Laing. Alex, I know you have been following Colombia very closely during the past years. Laing recently invested in a road concession in Colombia, Ruta del Cacao. I would like to know, what is your view on the Colombian infrastructure market, and perhaps what are the best practices do you think we should consider in Colombia?
Sure. Well, thank you, Carlos, and good afternoon and good morning to my fellow panelists. Thank you also to ProColombia and the British Colombian Chamber for inviting me to be on this distinguished panel. Maybe by way of background, Carlos and participants, I just wanted to give a bit of context to the type of investor Laing is. So first of all, we are an equity investor. We focus only on infrastructure projects. But we have a very unique history because we are a long-standing British company, 170 years old. For most of that time, we were a construction company. But since 20 years ago, we sold the construction business to focus on investments. But because of our history, it makes us a very different type of investor. So first of all, we only invest in greenfield projects. So these are projects before the end of construction. So that allows us to deliver new infrastructure to countries and communities. The second thing that makes us a bit different is we are a very active and technical investor. And again, that's due to our history. We used to be a construction company. A lot of the people we have in the company today are people with a construction background or an engineering background. And the last thing that makes us a little bit different is the fact that we invest our own money. So we're not a fund. We invest our own money, our own balance sheet. And again, that makes us more rigorous and more careful in the way we invest. And it also aligns us with the contractor partners that we work with. So we started looking at Latin America a few years ago. 3 years ago, I was asked to find a new region for investment for the company. At the time, we were very active and established in 3 regions. So that's Europe, North America, and Australia. And I was asked to find a 4th region, and preferably one with a huge growth potential. And we settled on Latin America because there was a huge infrastructure need in the region, and we felt very positive about the potential of infrastructure in the Latin American region. But having looked around in a few countries, I picked Colombia, and now I'm trying to answer your question now, Carlos. We picked Colombia as our headquarters and the first country for us to invest in. And the reasons why we picked Colombia, haven't changed. First of all, it's a country with a very fundamental need for infrastructure, particularly given its topography. The impact that infrastructure will have on a country is very profound. So we felt that this was a country where the infrastructure pipeline was going to be very strong. The second reason was because we felt it had a very good investment framework for infrastructure. We looked at the legal system, we looked at the reliability of the political regime, and we looked at the commitment to infrastructure of the country. And all of this pointed to the same thing, that it's a country with a very strong commitment and framework for infrastructure. And the third reason why we picked Colombia was because it's related to what I mentioned earlier, the fact that infrastructure will have a very profound positive impact on the community. And that's important to John Laing, because we see ourselves as an investor with a purpose, and one that seeks to have a very positive impact on the community we can invest in. So I'm very pleased to hear a lot of focus on environmental issues, a lot of focus on sustainable issues, because that is something that's very, very important to us as an investor as well. So we destination for infrastructure investments, and to demonstrate that, to underline that view, we have made a real commitment to Colombia by setting up an office in Bogota and recruiting a good number of senior locals. So as of today, we have got 8 senior Colombians based in our Bogota office, and which is the headquarters team. And despite the COVID issues recently, we've continued to recruit. 3 of the 8 staff members were recruited over the last few months. In fact, the most senior staff member was recruited 2 weeks ago. And we are also proud of the fact that we have recruited a dedicated ESG specialist, someone who has spent a career interacting with local communities and seeking to improve the lives of the local communities, because that's something, as I mentioned, that is very important to John Laing. And coming to the second part, what can Colombia learn or best practices they can take on board from the international community? I think it's gone a long way in terms of leading the way on the sustainability point, on the environmental issues. We come and we don't necessarily see huge gaps, but what we do try to do is to share our experiences on governance, share our experiences on sustainable issues in our project company, but also in the investments that we get involved in. Diversity is another area that's very important to us, and again, it's something that we try to share our experiences on locally. So I'm proud to say that of the 8-member team we have in Bogota, 5 of them are women. So it's quite rare for an investment company to have a majority gender balance in favor of women. So it's something we're proud of. It's it's something that we feel that is a key part of our values, something we can share locally. So I think, Carlos, that's where we stand on Colombia. We feel very bullish about the future. We remain committed. We set up a significant office, and I'm pleased to say that, hearing all the projects that both ministers have mentioned, many of them are on our list. So we are in teaming discussion project. We are also very keen on the Acceso Norte project, Rio Magdalena, Canal del Dique. All of these are on our list. We are actively pursuing teaming discussions. And on the energy side, we are also looking very closely at the Transmilenio tender, particularly when it relates to electric buses, because we feel that is a sector that is very important to us. The smart meter sector is very interesting to hear about. It's an area that we look very closely at in the UK and Australia. So it's definitely a sector that we will track closely in Colombia. And the final project that caught my attention was the Pacifico Regas project that Minister Mesa mentioned. Again, it's something that we like very much. The gas sector, and the way this project is structured could be of great interest to us.
Hey, Alex, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you for all the speakers. Now we can open a session until 8:30. For questions and answers, and I would like to start with one question for all the speakers. And it's about the current situation and probably about the future. I mean, after or during this pandemic, we have seen things that we have never seen before. We have seen empty airports, parked cars, empty roads, people with fears to go into public transportation and thinking just to walk and probably to ride a bike. And of course, that might disrupt all the traditional way we used to have to finance contracts. How do you think this is going to impact in our projects, in the infrastructure projects, in the energy projects, all these new things that have been happening?
Well, if you excuse me, I'll just start saying that, of course, it's going to have an impact, especially on the airport projects, because, we have to realize that the recovery of the airport transportation is going to be a much, much slower recovery. So that's one part of it. This is something we are studying, working with the private sector and along the lines with all the government agencies that deal not only with our contracts, our infrastructure projects, but also with the legal issues, such as our agency that have the legal defense of the country. And we're all working even with the control entities to identify sorts of tackling with these problems. But with regard to the road projects and the other projects, I have to be honest, the COVID has been even a motive to continue working in the structuring of the projects in order to be on time and to meet our deadlines that we have for the releasing of the files and releasing the bids. And on the other hand, this is a really good experience, an example of recovering activities after the first very strict lockdown. The infrastructure sector was the first sector that was authorized to open activities. After the first lockdown, in the second phase of our lockdown, this sector was open to work. And we work hand in hand with the concessionaries and also with the regional authorities, which were very important in order to commit and convince them that the projects could be developed on a safety way and protecting the health of the workers, using the adequate protection elements for the personnel and applying the protocols in order to prevent the projects and the work to be a factor of spreading the COVID-19. And it has been an example because actually, I'm not saying we have not had some isolated cases of individuals that have presented COVID-19, but actually we have known not even one project of all the projects that we have that has been a cluster or something like that. Are mainly isolated cases. We have been able of showing the country and demonstrating that with these strict protocols and taking into account all the protection elements and all the safety measures that were adopted by each one of the projects, we can work, we can continue working, in some cases having some delays, small delays, of course, that's true, but we have been able of recovering most of the employment that we have in February and reopening most of our works, hand in hand with the regional authorities and hand in hand with them and guaranteeing them that we could also protect and that we were not a factor that will spread the virus and that will put in danger the communities around the projects. So I have to say that with regard to the infrastructure projects, we're even documenting the experience because it's a very good example of how we can commit with this new normality. We can work. In some cases, it has, of course, some small delays, but we can work and continue delivering the projects. Even yesterday, we delivered one of the phases of one of the projects in Accesos Norte with President Duque. So I believe this sector is an example of reactivation and would be fundamental for the recovery of the economy. So most importantly, I think we have to take a deep look at the airport concessions because those are mainly the ones that are going to tackle with the problem of the small recovery of the sector. But with regard to roads and the other multimodal projects, I think we have been able of coping with the problems and solving them hand in hand with the concessionaries and with the regional authorities.
Carlos, if I may, on the energy side, I think, and I think one of the things that the COVID-19 has done to people is that people realize now how critical energy, electricity is going to be in this new normalcy, as the minister was saying, because people are working from home with multiple devices, and now also with reduction in CO2 emissions. I guess people would like to take this opportunity as well because they're more conscious about the footprint from our rental point of view. So I think this is a great opportunity to continue to advance the projects of unconventional renewables, especially to continue to expand our energy grid. Also, I think from the point of view of security, people are also aware that it would be good to have distributed energy resources. So large companies will also have access to energy that's generated by themselves, either with solar systems or other type of generation. So on that front, the other part of the puzzle is that I think this is also going to be a great opportunity to explain to people the importance of mining in the energy transition, because we need a lot of minerals for panels, for wind turbines, for the grid. And in Colombia in particular, as I was saying in the presentation, we have this huge potential to diversify the mining matrix. So yes, I think obviously on mobility, which affects us because we also provide all the fuel for mobility. We're going to see a reduction in massive transportation, as you were saying in your introduction, but that also probably is going to boost other type of transportation. So thinking about electric vehicles, not only cars, but also other means like motorcycles or even scooters. I think we also have an opportunity there to try to promote that type of mobility, which is clean, and people would be willing to or looking to have different modes of transportation going forward.
Carlos, my view is that like most international investors, we invest in many different countries, and it's very interesting to see the different reactions of governments in different countries. First of all, the impact of COVID on infrastructure, delays to infrastructure and economy affects all countries. So it's not just Colombia, but how governments react, I think, determines the confidence in which international investors will have. And I must say, we've been very impressed with the way the Colombian government has reacted. First of all, they were very decisive in closing down the entire economy very early on, before there were too many cases. But then again, very quickly starting to open up different sectors. And I'm pleased to have seen that infrastructure was one of the first sectors that they opened up. So to take the case study of our own project, Ruta de Cacao, so the construction work on the project stopped for about a month. But very quickly after they reopened, we mobilized and, we started to catch up on the construction. And now I don't think we are very far behind our construction schedule, but, doing it in a way that's safe for all the workers, which is, very important to us. So, I think the way the Colombian government has reacted to the crisis in a decisive way has been very impressive and gives us a lot of confidence. I think the other thing that's important to focus on is just the continued delivery of projects. So in the same way that, Minister Orozco's, team helped to unlock many of the 4G projects, I think it's important to maintain the momentum on the existing projects, ensure that they continue to be delivered, because that is something, again, that gives international investors confidence. And the final way I feel that the COVID crisis will impact the investment climate is that it's going to put a greater focus on quality. So this goes to the quality of the partners, quality of the contractors, quality of the investors that are involved in projects. And these are things that lenders will focus on. These are things that all the participants in a project will focus on, because things are quite uncertain and subject to some risk. So we think as John Laing as an investor will be well placed and will be in a strong position in that sort of environment.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answers. A question here for Minister Mesa. They're asking, you have introduced incentives for solar panels, but there are many available for community level biomass and energy from waste projects. Is there any that the government is viewing for not interconnected areas, not interconnected zones?
The incentives on the law 1715 are for all unconventional renewable sources. So it does include solar, includes wind, includes biomass, waste to energy. It even includes small hydro projects. We're aware of the potential as well, of this waste to energy and using other biomass inputs for generation. We're gonna be working closely, especially with the agricultural sector. As I said, right now we have the incentives that apply, across all the unconventional renewables, and we've also seen some interest. There was one biomass project that participated in the auction. It didn't make the price cut, so it wasn't awarded. But we knew that they were using the incentives that we introduced. So we probably need a little bit more work and work with these projects, but they have the incentives that other projects have already used.
We have another question here from the public, and it's about offshore wind farms. And the question is if the government is considering any offshore project, considering that the UK has long experience in this area.
Yes, that's one of the new areas that we're going to be working in this administration. It's going to be part of the new energy sources that we would like to promote. So we have offshore wind, because we know there's huge potential. We still haven't received any firm interest from companies, but I know some companies have been even discussing this in the media. We have hydrogen. We have geothermal resources. On both of those, we already have emissions, and we're looking to set up a regulatory framework for those. And the third one is the one we were talking just before, which is waste to energy and plasma resources. But yeah, wind is in the radar, and we hope to push that as well, because what we've seen especially in La Guajira, where the wind parks are located, is that if you go offshore, the potential is even higher.
Very interesting indeed. Unfortunately, I think we don't have more times for questions. I see some more questions. The time is limited. Thank you very much to all our speakers. We have learned a lot in this during this panel. All the support that is available from the United Kingdom, particularly in green bonds, circular economy, and railways. We learned about this big portfolio of projects in transportation. Particularly in infrastructure and urban transportation system, everything with a green stance and focus on sustainability, and also a great portfolio of projects in renewable energies, also in oil and gas. Thank you, Alex, Minister Orozco, Minister Mesa. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much for all of you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Carlos.
To be here. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Carlos, for steering us in this discussion. And thank you again, Minister Orozco, Alex, Minister Mesa, and Lord Grimstone for joining us today. Thank you, Carlos, for steering us in this amazing discussion. It has certainly been very exciting. And we've had a lot of interest from the audience. We had 300 people today, and even more than 300 at the moment. So amazing turnout, which is a great indicator for today. I just want to remind people that we'll have another webinar tomorrow on shifting supply chains in Colombia as an export platform. It will begin at 1 p.m. again, British time, 2 p.m. Central European time. So do register if you haven't done so using the event webpage. Thank you very much to the speakers, the moderator, and the audience for joining us today. It was a great discussion, a lot of opportunities ahead. And if you're an investor and haven't registered for a one-to-one meeting with our projects, please do so using the instructions in the webpage. Thank you very much and have a nice rest of the day.